He walked quietly behind his daughter, careful not to be seen by her. There were already some kids waiting at the bus stop when she got there. He hid behind a tree when he saw the bus pull up. The other children started boarding the bus, but he saw a hand stop her. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. 9-year-old Abigail Brodem lived in Montana with her father, Jeffrey. She had recently lost her mother, but Jeffrey was often surprised by her bravery. She also had an active imagination and a curious nature. Strangely, Abigail would come home from school without her shoes. But when it kept happening, he started becoming curious. Whenever he asked her why she kept coming home without her shoes, she answered, "They told me." Jeffrey was growing concerned about his daughter's strange behavior and needed to find out why it kept happening. He quietly followed her as she walked to the bus stop, being careful not to make any noise and be discovered. Jeffrey watched as Abigail started going up the bus stairs. He was shocked when he suddenly saw a hand shoot out to stop her from getting on the bus. He watched anxiously, struggling to understand why the bus driver would stop his daughter from getting on the bus. The hand belonged to Kiki Brown, the strict bus driver. Jeffrey angrily hurried over to confront the woman who was stopping his daughter from getting on the bus. "Abby, Daddy's here," Jeffrey called as he got within hearing distance. She turned around, and her frown turned to a smile when she recognized him. He immediately confronted the bus driver. "What right do you have to tell my daughter to take her shoes off?" he angrily asked. Kiki seemed unconcerned as she eyed Jeffrey. "What wrong did my daughter do to you?" Jeffrey demanded. She dismissively said, "Her shoes are always dirty and muddy, and I'm tired of cleaning up after her." "It's a safety hazard," she said. The other children were staring and giggling, and Jeffrey realized that he might be embarrassing Abigail. But he couldn't let his daughter be treated like that. He had to do something. The bus driver's nonchalant attitude made him even more angry. "That's your job," he said. "You're supposed to ensure the safety of the children, not burden them with such requests. Other children have dirty shoes too." By now, the children had fallen silent, and everyone was staring at the angry father. Jeffrey turned toward his daughter, ignoring the bus driver, and told her to take a seat on the bus. Abigail gave Kiki a knowing look as she walked to a seat. There were now more children filming the confrontation. The other kids on the bus were getting impatient to get going. Somebody asked, "Can we go to school now?" Kiki simply ignored the question. Her behavior further fueled Jeffrey's anger. He told her that he was going to file a complaint against her and would not be backing down. Would this threat make her back down, though? Kiki was not about to back down and arrogantly said, "Go ahead and complain. It won't change a thing." She wanted Jeffrey to get out of the bus so she could close the door, but he was not budging and stopped the doors from closing. He was not going to be dismissed. Kiki's dismissive attitude enraged Jeffrey even further, and he was determined to hold her to account for her actions. He watched, fuming, as the bus drove off. Then he rushed back up his driveway to make a call to the school principal. Jeffrey arranged to meet with the principal immediately and made his way to the school. He told the principal what had happened and that he expected the school to take action to address the bus driver's behavior. It seemed that the principal was taking the matter seriously, but he still wasn't sure that it would be handled properly. The concerned father told the principal how unfair he thought Kiki was being. He explained that their driveway was gravel, and when it rained, Abigail had no choice but to get her shoes muddy because there was nowhere else to walk. The school official listened and seemed sympathetic to his concerns. A couple of days later, the school principal called Jeffrey to let him know that the matter had been dealt with. Not only had Kiki received a warning, but the school vehicle authority had also been informed of her misconduct. Jeffrey didn't have much faith in the principal's ideas or commitment. He had seen similar cases many times before, and he didn't doubt he would continue to. Taking the kind of person Kiki was meant that she would never change. They refused to change their ways, and no one could convince them otherwise. But was the worry dad correct in this case? Or would the driver have a change of heart? But at that particular moment, it was irrelevant. Jeffrey was only considering the facts, which made it clear that the school would have been oblivious to this issue if he hadn't raised it to them. So what would a simple warning do about it? Kiki clearly had a negative mindset. What difference would a minor punishment make to someone like her? Jeffrey knew he needed to get something more substantial, something that would let parents rest easy knowing their children were safe with their bus drivers. Jeffrey demanded that the school explain what they would do to alleviate his concerns. What steps could they still take to prevent this sort of conduct? To Jeffrey's knowledge, the school administration had simply given the driver a slap on the wrist and left it at that. She had been forced to deal with similar kinds of behavior before, and she was well versed in how to deal with someone as obnoxious as Kiki. She would go further than a mild warning. All of a sudden, the school was getting a huge wave of complaints about the new dash cams. Some parents saw it as the school taking away the children's privacy rather than as a security measure. These parents didn't understand what the school was trying to achieve with these new strategies. But the determined father hadn't expected that angry parents would send much of their displeasure in his direction. He set himself up for a shock by looking at the social media profile. Many parents believed he was at fault for the increased security measures. A large group of other parents supported Jeffrey's actions. The majority of them had actually heard the entire story in context, and they could understand the reasons for his actions. It all left the principal in a difficult position, as she wanted to satisfy both parties. Many parents had never understood the context in which the events in the videos occurred, which led them to shun Jeffrey, but others knew what really happened. Once word of the incident started spreading, it soon came to light that Abigail was not the only victim of Kiki's bullying behavior. It became clear that Kiki was rather infamous for her behavior with children, and not just because of her unprofessional conduct around them. Several parents revealed that they had experienced situations not unlike Abigail's with their own children, and yet none of them had been willing to take action like Jeffrey did, and he couldn't understand why. Jeffrey had conversations with all the other parents who had spoken up about the treatment of their kids after he had opened the can of worms. What he discovered was appalling. He was shocked to find that numerous parents were too scared to criticize the bus driver publicly. Why not? Had Kiki sent them threats? Some other parents who also stayed silent did it because they were aware of the possible repercussions. They knew they weren't likely to win the fight. But now that they were a united front, they demanded that the school do something. Would they finally get the results they wanted? He was scared that his young daughter's self-esteem would suffer simply from riding the bus. Jeffrey reassured his little girl that no one would ever be able to humiliate her like that ever again. However, he would be forced to break his promise after the next incident. Abigail had been getting too much attention for her liking at school recently because of the bus incident, and she was looking forward to things getting back to normal. She was grateful to her father for standing up for her in this way. Her troubles over, Abigail could go back to the carefree existence of a little girl. Oblivious to the events that followed Jeffrey's complaint, she put her trust in the idea that her dad would always take care of any problem that came her way. But the young girl couldn't have guessed what she'd have to face in just a few weeks' time. Abigail now no longer needed to be afraid to board the bus. She felt like she was always protected. Plus, she had been taught a few vital things about her own rights. Nasty bus driver Kiki also learned an important lesson in humility and respect from the incident. She now realized the gravity of her careless actions and the effect they could have on children. She promised Abigail that she didn't need to avoid the mud because of Kiki ever again. And if she did encounter some, it was the driver's responsibility to clean it. It always reinforced the bond between father and daughter, and it also reaffirmed how important it was to have empathy and take a stand against injustice. With Jeffrey's next decision, he even tried to meet Kiki halfway. Jeffrey decided to have the driveway paved eventually, but he tried to keep the rest of the house exactly as it was when Abigail's mother was alive. Eventually, Abigail even befriended Kiki, strange as it may have been. So fortunately, the experience had no negative effects on Abigail, and growing up, Abigail retained her sense of adventure. Kiki was grateful for the outcome and never worried about having to clean up the girl's mess again. Inevitably, she would not remain as innocent as the little 9-year-old girl as she grew up, but she never lost the sense of safety she got from knowing that her father would always be there to protect her. She was comforted to know that her father would always support her and fight off any bully who dared to take her on.